This conference will now be recorded.
All right, brothers. Well, welcome to our second official Team Queester call for 2020 for VKTLW, which, as we all now know, that's the virtual Croc Transformational Leaders Workshop 2020. Tonight, we're going to get started with a few updates and talk a little bit about preparation now that we have some new resources available to us, which you guys should have been getting 2 or 3 emails since our last call with new resources that are available to you. So we'll go over those real quick and just talk a little bit about structure, talk a little bit about facilitation and what we should expect of each other. And then we'll get into some Q&A, because I know there's a lot of shit that's been going on, a lot of things changing, a lot of new information. So I anticipate there's probably some questions that are relevant to the whole group, and I want to make sure we pay attention to that in this call. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into this and get started. The first thing I want to mention is that we are going to be collaborating with 2 brothers from the expansion team, and hopefully you guys all know who the expansion team is. I don't think we have any new members to KTLW this year. It's all veteran facilitators, but our expansion team helps our colonies while they're on their journey to becoming an initiated chapter in Sigma Chi. And this year we've got Colin and Kevin who are going to be joining us during the training. And my understanding, and one of those guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I know Kevin's on the call, you guys are going to train with us for the Team Queester portion, but when KTLW kicks in, you guys are going to be working directly with the colonies, so you're not going to be facilitating with us. You'll be facilitating with the treasurers of the colonies. So hopefully I got that right, but it's a pleasure to have you guys with us. Welcome to Team Queester. And if you want, I'll give you a minute here that you can introduce yourself and maybe just give us a little perspective on how things are going on your end from VKTLW. I think that would be cool to hear what you guys are working on. So I think I heard Kevin on the line. So Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me. My understanding is that is the plan, but it changes every day, and that's a relatively new plan that we were joining all of you. So we're just sort of rolling with it, and we'll see how it goes. I went to Clarkson University along with Sujati, but he's older than me, so we didn't overlap back then. But super excited to be part of the Queester team. I've done workshop with a number of teams over the years, and what I've seen so far with Queesters is you all are by far the most organized and have the most amount of resources available. So that's super excited to see. So maybe I won't want to go back to expansion next year. But I live in Colorado, and I'm the colony advisor for the colony at CU Boulder right now. And previously I was the colony advisor at Binghamton University when I worked there in upstate New York. So I'm on my 2nd colony at the moment.
Wonderful, brother. Thanks for sharing with us, and thanks for being here. And as we go through this process, please let us know what we can do to help you out, to help our colony brothers. We really appreciate all you're doing for them and for our team as well. Thank you. Is Colin on? There's names on the list. I just see caller. I don't know if Colin's on or not. Maybe not.
What's up with no one sharing webcam?
What's that?
What's up with no one sharing webcams? There's just a few of us sharing our webcams now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's hard to smack talk when you can't see people, you know?
Well, we'll see if Colin jumps in.
There we go.
We'll let him introduce himself to us. Well, once again, welcome to the expansion team, guys, for being here with us. And let's all make sure that we can help them out any way possible, help get them the resources they need. So I have seen the expansion curriculum going back to when Tony Altamore was in charge of the team. And Kevin, you can correct me. I think Dean's still in charge, right?
Yes.
But I'll tell you what, brothers, their curriculum, I mean, keep in mind, they have to run the full spectrum of the fraternity when working with the colonies, and their content is just beyond what we see from anyone else. It is impeccable. So good to have you guys here. And along the way, Kevin and Colin, if you're on, feel free to give us feedback from your perspective on how we can improve as a team, because I've seen how you guys do it. And I'm excited to hear your feedback on how we can improve ourselves. So once again, thanks for being here. Well, let's jump into a few content and curriculum updates real quick. As far as facilitator training is concerned, we now have our LMS up, which is our learning management system. I think you guys all know from previous calls and emails, it was going to be Canvas. Now you should have your email. You should have had the opportunity to log in. It's kind of cool as I get updates when you guys do your work. So props to Phil, Mike McFadden, trying to think. I think Len's been on there, a couple other guys. So it's kind of neat. I get updates when you guys complete your modules, and not that it's relevant to this section. We'll talk about it later. You guys are going to get updates if you turn on your notifications from your undergrads too when workshop starts. So you might turn yours off because you don't want to see that all day, but on my end, it's kind of neat. So Canvas is up and running, as you guys know. Let's talk a little bit real quick about what is on Canvas currently. If you've been on Canvas, you know that there's a tutorial for the Canvas software. So it kind of runs you through, basic knowledge of how to use Canvas and how to navigate it. I have talked to about 2 or 3 people, not all on Team Queester, that have had some challenges with navigating it. Most of what we're recommending is that you just spend a little bit more time in it. You'll kind of see as you go through it that the dashboard and the modules is where you're going to spend most of your time. And once some of the other things come online, such as the assignments and the chat boards, we'll get into that a little bit more. But for right now, just make sure that you go through the Canvas tutorial in the software and try and poke around and get familiar with it. Virtual facilitation is in there, and facilitation in general. That was built out by SCLI for us, so that whole module on facilitation's in there. Most of the Canvas tutorial stuff is going to be video. Most of the virtual facilitation information is going to be written. Typically, there's not much verbiage on each screen, so it's pretty easy to go through, makes sense. And there are some videos in there too from some of the SCLI content, such as a Sigma Chi leadership model and values-based decision making, I should say. So make sure you go through that. It's a pretty easy click through. But the virtual facilitation is up there, and there's also a section on the Zoom meeting technology, which we'll be using for our virtual calls, or our synchronous meetings, as we're calling them. So,
hey Johnny, quick question for you. I haven't gotten through all of the tutorials yet. On the Canvas side, are we going to be using the Canvas teacher app as well as the Canvas student app? Because I noticed there were 2 different apps in the app store there.
So if you download the app, it should have the white background with the red circle.
Yeah.
So you can, I believe you can download either. So what happens is when you log into Canvas, you're set up in Canvas as a facilitator. So whether Canvas would consider that a teacher, you're set up to have certain permissions. So as long as you're logging in with your credentials, I'm not sure it matters where you get it from. It's going to log you in and get you to the dashboard that you need to be. Now, keep in mind, if you have been there from the email, there's also a specific link. So I already had Canvas downloaded on my phone, so I probably shouldn't talk so confidently about that. I was using the student app because I've taken class through Canvas, and when I logged in through the app, I had my with my credentials from Sigma Chi, I had my facilitator functionality. So that's why I'm saying I'm not sure that it matters.
Yeah, it was pretty easy to get the student app up and running and everything. I just saw that there was also a teacher app, and I didn't know we were going to be using both, from our standpoint or not. So that's fine.
Yeah, I think if you download the first one that comes up in your App Store or your Google Play, that one should be sufficient if you're going to run it through your phone. And just so you guys know, I do have a link up on TeamQCer.com under the VKTLW facilitator training page. All the way at the bottom, I put that on there today. So if you click on that, it takes you right to the login for the Sigma Chi portal for Canvas, if you need that. So as far as Zoom's concerned, I'll be honest, I have not been through the Zoom training yet on Canvas, so I haven't seen it. I'm assuming it's sufficient training. If you would go through it first before we inundate ourselves with questions, and then keep in mind too, because I like to volunteer people, Stu's kind of our resident Zoom guy. So if you go through the training on Canvas for Zoom and you have questions, of course, always feel free to hit me up, especially if you think it's something that other facilitators and teams are going to have questions on, because I'll pump those out to HQ, and then they can disseminate that information out to Team Croc and then down to their facilitators. But if it's just a quick hitter, you just need to know something about Zoom that you didn't see in the videos or didn't quite make sense, you can always hit Stu up, because Stu loves getting your text messages and phone calls. But he's got that Zoom.
And text messages and phone calls are quicker to respond to, I think, than emails these days. So.
What's that? You prefer a text message?
Yep.
There you go. There, text Stu. He'll get you going on Zoom. But for right now, guys, that's really all the materials that are up there. The Queester officer training materials should become live tomorrow, so 7/10, and included in that are going to be the videos we have up on TeamQCer.com, as well as the resource files that are on TeamQCer.com, and you'll be able to use Canvas to go through that, and what you'll see in Canvas is what the undergrads will see. Now, having said that, it's all the same content that's up on TeamQCer. That's what we gave them to upload. So I would say go through it in Canvas if you would, because it'll help us get used to the platform. I know it's easy to either go to TeamQCer.com or to go to the TeamQCer YouTube page, because all the videos are up there as well. But try and use the Canvas app, because that'll just help you navigate through. One thing I haven't seen yet, and if you guys experience this, hopefully I'll be seeing the content at the same time or before you guys on Canvas. I asked if the videos get compressed at all, because some of if you guys have been far enough into the modules where you see we're working in, say, the budget template or some of the software, when I played it through Sigma Chi SharePoint, and I think it was just their media player, some of the numbers and wording was hard to read. But I've been told since they were produced in high definition, they should upload into Canvas in high def. But if anybody notices any issues with that, please let me know that right away, especially if it's something I'm not experiencing on my end, because we want to try and get that fixed, because that's going to translate directly to what the undergrads might see. So that's all I have for content and curriculum updates. We're going to talk more about content and curriculum, but I just wanted you to know the Canvas was up and running, and the TeamQCer material should be coming tomorrow. So I'll pause there just to see if there's any questions on what we've gone over so far.
Johnny, just a question. Are we going to have kind of like some practice run-throughs with Zoom and Canvas?
So on the Canvas side, that's going to be more of us poking around and playing with that. There was a discussion about potentially creating a chat board that we could play with. I think Team Croc is working with that right now. When you guys go through the Canvas training, I think there's a spot where you guys can enter information about, what is a facilitator? What does that mean to you? And you get to answer that question, and you'll see that there's other people that are not part of our team that are answering on that chat board. So that's just an example of how, say their chat board works and how our assignment boards will work. So that's one instance in which we can do that. Whether Team Queester is going to have its own chat board that we can all play with, that I don't know. As of right now, I don't think we have that set up. So
I guess if I can be maybe a little bit more specific, is the first time that, say, I as a facilitator am going to be presenting on Zoom, is that going to be to my discussion group, or is there a way maybe that we can schedule a dry run or two with other faculty members?
Yeah, I'll get into that in a little bit later in the call, but yes, absolutely.
And I'm happy to set up a call just to do Zoom only. I mean, just to talk through and walk through that, and I can share host controls and all that stuff with you pretty easily. So I'm pretty familiar with all that.
Yeah, I'll talk about that briefly when we talk about the co-facilitation, and then of course at that point I'll be more than happy to volunteer Stu to do more for us. Any other questions on content and curriculum yet? And,
hey Johnny,
we'll have Q&A at the end too. So
when I downloaded the Canvas app, I struggled for a little while to try to find the right URL or site for Sigma Chi. After a little while, it became obvious that it's the same one that you click on when you do when you get to their website. You just have to cut off the tail end of it. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but if you're struggling with it, send me a note. I'll send it over to you. Jim's going to send out another note to everybody, letting them know this is what that actual website is, but it's not obvious, and it doesn't log you in absolutely the first time you go in until you enter it.
And you're talking from the app standpoint, Ryan?
Yeah, it's just on the app. Ironically, if you take all of the Canvas training, you take the facilitator training through the website, it actually teaches you how to log into Canvas and download the app. But of course, I jumped that part, downloaded the app, and then couldn't figure out how to get to the Sigma Chi website. So it's there. You can, but it is just the same URL that you would use to get to the website when it asks you for Sigma Chi's information to get to our training content.
Well, I should have written this down when I did it, but to that point, Ryan, since I already had the app when I opened it, there's a search function where you put in the name of your school, and I'm highly confident I used one of two. I think I actually typed in VKTLW, and I think it popped up. And if it wasn't that, I typed in Sigma Chi, and it recognized that as well. So if you hop into the app and you're looking to, if you see the search function for the school, you should be able to type in either Sigma Chi or VKTLW, and it should pop up as an option to get you in.
Yeah, the name is vktlw.infrastructure.com. That's the actual name that you need to put in there, but you can search on VKTLW.
There you go. No, it's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, we'll keep moving on here, and we'll stop periodically for questions again. Real quick, guys, on TeamQuester.com. I mean, now that Canvas is up, we want to use it, but obviously the Quester materials aren't available. Hopefully they'll be up tomorrow. But here's a couple things that I added onto the website, and I'm going to keep updating TeamQuester.com, especially for the guys that have gotten used to it. Again, I want us to push to Canvas so we get familiar with it. But I will say, from a training perspective for the facilitators, part of the point of using TeamQuester.com is I have it separated out in modules with the respective resources. So hopefully you guys have been at least through one or two modules, and you've already seen that. So I definitely want us to be able to get into Canvas and use that. But I should also say that TeamQuester.com is kind of set up for a module by module learning structure. So I guess that is kind of important. One of the things that I added since our last call was module 5 on RMF tax updates. We're only supposed to have 4 modules, but Team Quester special. We have this 5th one because Mike Church asked us to make sure that through our division, we're educating the undergrads on the changes for risk management tax insurance, I should say. Did I write RMF tax updates? That's my fault. I meant RMF insurance updates. But there are some things that are very important to the chapter. I'll just give you one detail that's really important. They're not increasing the price this year. Even if they have increases, it's going to be $197 per brother. And they're going to take, for the first half of this year, this academic year coming up, they're going to take the 2019 to 2020 numbers the undergrads have and reduce their membership by 25%. And they're going to use that number of members to multiply by the 197. So it's basically a 25% reduction from last year's numbers. So hopefully that works to their benefit. I have not had the chance to ask the question yet. Well, what happens if this year's numbers are lower than that 75% of last year's? But I'm sure that RMF is going to work with our chapters to make sure they're getting the best and cheapest rates. So that's just one example. But that module's up there now, so you guys can watch it. It's a short module. I don't even think it's 10 minutes. And there's a print off that you can download that has the information on it, with some Q&As. So wanted you guys to be familiar with that. I put the co-facilitation pairings up on TeamQConferencecall07-09-20 since that's password protected for the VKTLW training page. I went ahead and put your guys' names in it, and you can see those pairings there. And I will also have the pairings up on our PowerPoint here tonight when we go over co-facilitation, so you guys can see who you're paired with. And then I also put up the Canvas and Zoom links so that those are available, which I already told you. And there's now an undergraduate resources page. We had that last year. This year, the view of it looks very similar to our VKTLW faculty training page. It goes module by module with the downloadable resources next to the videos that they're related to. And as far as, VKTLW, all this information is going to be in Canvas, including the downloadable files. And I've made a request. Canvas can do it, but we'll see if HQ has time. They may even be able to get to those downloadable files when they're in that particular module. So we'll see how that goes. If that doesn't work, on the left-hand side in the menu, there's a Files tab in Canvas when you get into it, and all the downloads should be there. So that'll include all the PowerPoint presentations. That'll include any of our Word or Excel templates, such as our budget builder, our 30, 60, 90-day letters. So all that stuff will be in Canvas. And from what we're being told right now, Canvas will be available for 1 month after workshop for participants and facilitators to go back in. But after that, we're probably going to lose access. So all that stuff is up on TeamQConferencecall07-09-20 for now under an unprotected page, so that any undergrad that goes to that site can get that information. And until we find out more about what the new Officer Academy will look like and what the deployment system will be for their resources, I plan on leaving that up on our site so it's available to them. So that's something you can share with the undergrads if you would like, especially during your Zoom calls, so they know where to get the resources. We just want to make sure that they understand they can't do VKTLW 2020 through TeamQConferencecall07-09-20. They got to do it through Canvas. So does that make sense? Hopefully. I'll pause there and see if you guys have any questions about the TeamQConferencecall07-09-20 updates. And to get coffee. All right, seeing none. Sorry, here we go.
Johnny, no questions, but man, just thank you so much for what you've done, man. It's a very intuitive website. It's really easy to follow, man. So I just really appreciate you retooling that. It's really great.
Oh, thanks, brother. I appreciate the feedback, and that was kind of the goal. Was hey, man, how do we make this as simple as possible? So if it's achieving its goal, well, I'll chalk that up as a win, brother. Thanks for the compliment. Let's talk just a little bit about co-facilitation. So if there's anybody that wasn't on the previous call, so here's kind of the thought on the co-facilitation. And I should say, Riggs, since you popped in there and made a comment, please feel free to jump in here from the SCLI perspective, because I know you guys did the development of a lot of these concepts and thoughts that we're incorporating into VKTLW, and I don't want to leave anything out if it's something I'm not 100% read into or something I didn't write down. But the co-facilitation thing's actually been practiced now with a province conference, I believe, in Northern California. And one of the things they noticed was, regardless of what everybody's abilities to use Zoom is or to do any type of virtual facilitation, I mean, some people do this for a living now, and we totally recognize that. And they do it on their own, and they can fly through the software, and they know how to do it and how to track and monitor and keep, their conversations and their presentations relevant. But that's actually a pretty small sector of the people that we have that are on our faculties that are actually performing these on a daily basis. And one of the things that came out of that province conference was a few people saying, man, this was, it was actually kind of tough to monitor the discussion while monitoring the chat board and trying to make sure I'm including things. And I mean, he probably won't mind me saying, I mean, one of the people that was saying this was our Team Croc head, Jeff Twyble. I mean, how long's Jeff been facilitating, and how many things has he created specifically for Sigma Chi learning? There's probably nobody better piped into or better able to perform this kind of learning environment. And he said it was tough. So if it's tough for Jeff, it's probably tough for most of us. And as Team Croc started talking about that, it's like, well, we probably need to mitigate that, especially because we're on a shortened time frame. We're trying to get a shit ton of information in everybody's hands, ask them to know a lot of stuff. What can we do? And it's like, we got to have two facilitators. So this co-facilitation is not unique to Team Queester. This is across every division, I should say, officer team in KTLW this year, and we think it's going to be pretty successful. So I'm going to go ahead and put these groups up so you guys can look at them and make negative comments about who I paired you with. And we'll talk a little bit about what co-facilitation actually means here in just a second. But actually, I should have done that slide first. Maybe I will. I'll put this back up in a minute with your pairing. So a couple things about the co-facilitation. One, let's understand our roles. So we have two roles, which is being called speaker or facilitator on the Team Croc side. That's what we're calling it. And we have chatter or moderator. And here's what both of those roles are for. The speaker is primarily focused on the verbal discussion that's taking place on the call. So we recognize that trying to monitor the technology and the chat board and, taking a look at the cameras and finding out who's engaged and who might need a question to get them drawn in, it's going to be really tough for the facilitator who's trying to direct the conversation to also perform all that functionality. So in the interim here, and I'm going to talk about some of the unique things we can do as Team Queester for this. The speaker is primarily focused on the verbal discussion. We want you to take notes on the topics, the ideas, the questions that are being shared, and reincorporating that into the conversation where relevant. And then finally, keeping the conversation on topic and relevant to the group. Now, the chatter is going to be focusing primarily on the chat board and incorporating those topics, those ideas, those questions that are shared on the chat board into the discussion. And keep in mind, when we do the alumni shit, our chat board isn't flying, comments and stuff like that. We don't know what the environment's going to be with our undergrads. They're used to this forum and this format. We might have a lot more action on it. And if anybody's been on an active chat board on one of these calls, I mean, sometimes they're going so fast, you got to scroll back up to see what the hell was written, right? The thing that you were reading. So maybe that will happen, maybe it won't, but we want to make sure somebody's focusing primarily on that activity. The chatter is going to have to decide what chat board items can be handled through the chat board. Maybe an undergrad has a question that can be answered really fast, but doesn't necessarily have to be brought up on the call. I mean, one of the things we've kind of talked about, and we're going to have to talk about more next week, because next week we'll have a call that will focus mostly on just facilitation, is these are 1 hour calls, right? 1 hour calls, and we have 4 of them. So that 1 hour at a time is very valuable time. So the chatter is going to have to determine, hey, should I answer this through the chat board so that one brother sees it? Or is this something that really needs to be brought up to the group? They're also going to have to ensure that some of the things that have been discussed on the Canvas discussion board is part of the conversation as well. Now, you're not going to have Canvas running at the same time. That's not the point. But the guys are going to be doing online assignments where they're responding to a couple questions after each module. So kind of want to put that on the chatter and the speaker, of course, to think about some of the things that were said and then determine whether that's something that has to be, or should be, I should say, incorporated into the discussion on the next call. And if that's, if the two facilitators determine that that in fact should be something that's brought up, we can have the chatter make sure that that gets worked into the conversation. Now, having said that, one of the things that's going to be very important, and this ties back to the question earlier about practicing the Zoom calls. I'll put the list back up so you guys can see who you're facilitating with. I want you to have at a minimum 1, hopefully 2 Zoom calls that you guys set up to get the 2 of you on. You know, I know it's easy to just call on the phone or FaceTime or whatever, but let's use the technology so we get familiar with it. And I want you guys talking to make sure that, you know, you're talking about the environment you want to create. You're both on the same page before you get into the discussions so that, you know, you guys know where each stands on, you know, hey, here are my strengths as a facilitator. I think I can help out here. Here are the areas I could need some help, and, you know, vice versa for the other facilitator. So I think that that would be really important. That'll give you a chance to clarify these roles a little bit, see where you're going to mesh and mirror them. I mean, all the pairings that I made, I have full confidence in both guys being able to do every single one of the tasks that the speaker chatter has. So you guys know how I like to give you guys the flexibility to do what you want, because that's why you're on the team. You guys can come up with how you want to make that work. The only thing that I'm going to say is that you guys can see on the screen here, these are the 2 roles and all of the things that have to get accomplished. I'm just going to ask that you guys determine how you're going to accomplish them together. So hopefully that makes sense. You guys are fucking rock stars, so I don't need to tell you how to do it. I just want to make sure it gets done since this is something new. I had a nice conversation with Dan Congisted today. Brother, I appreciate that phone call. One of the things we're supposed to be working on is providing a facilitation guide. You guys know I've always done that in the past, and Dan and I had a nice conversation about how we can maybe use that to get everybody kind of on the same page, to talk about the things coming out of these videos and the modules that, you know, we should target to hit in those 1-hour conversations, fully realizing too that, you know, the facilitations don't always go the direction that we want them to go. Sometimes something really awesome gets brought up, and as the facilitator, you're like, you know what, man, I think I better take it in this direction. This is really important stuff, right? We still want some of that flexibility to be in there, but I think it'll be important to give you a couple talking points for each call to kind of say, hey, these are the things that they just went through. This is what their assignments were. You know, here's some talking points to get you started. So I'm going to try and have that done hopefully by the end of the weekend. And of course, I'll put that up on teamqueester.com so you guys can download it. And I guess number 4, I put in Canvas facilitator training, but we already mentioned that earlier, that's in there. So that's another resource you guys have for facilitating this year. So that was a big mouthful of stuff. I'm going to pause there for a second. And while I do that, see if there's any questions. I'm going to back up and put the pairings list up for the guys that are online so they can see it.
Johnny,
Yes, sir.
on the chat, I've had the opportunity the last 30, 40 days, probably to spend 40 hours in Zoom meetings and stuff like that. And it seemed like the chat room all of a sudden takes over all of the attention of the group that's on there because of the comments and the questions. Does anybody know a way to turn it off where it can only go, the chat can only go to one person? I mean, I know how to do it, but I mean, is there any way to, as the team, to turn it off so it only goes to the chatter and the facilitator? Because I can tell you, I've seen some chats that have just taken over.
Gone sideways.
Well, I think what I would say to that, Len, in the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish with VKTLW, I think that we're going to want to leave up the, whatever the full chat functions are. But here's
Okay.
where I think when you guys, start off, and I think next week we need to have a call, or should have a call, where we spend a little bit more time on, this facilitated environment. To me, that's a setting expectation item. No different than being in person and saying, hey guys, we know this is the digital age, and information's moving and you guys are connected and all that shit, and that's fine. But we're not going to have our cell phones out during our group, and you guys texting back and forth with people that aren't here, right? That's a clear expectation I think most, if not all, facilitators have and should set for the in-person facilitation. And it's a wonderful point. And to that point, Len, for anybody that has some questions about that, and maybe you can lead some of our discussion next week if you're available. You do have a ton of experience recently, and you and I've talked about that offline. And this is a great point. In my mind, though, because we also have to be careful. As an example, we also have to follow what SCLI expects of us in these discussions. One of those items is we're not going to be recording these calls. We have to be very careful with that. That could get into legality issues in certain states, certain provinces. So I'm not sure that we want to limit functionality, because that might not be part of the goal. But I think that is a clear expectation. Like, hey guys, we got a short time together. We got a lot of shit that's relevant to our office that we got to go over. Let's not overrun our chat board, with stuff that's not relevant, or turn it into a joke session or whatever. It's yik yak all over again for those that remember that. And say, hey, we're going to keep it relevant. And by the way, one of the facilitators is monitoring that. So let's keep it tight. Let's keep it relevant. But if you could, Len, let's think of more things like that from your experience that we need to know as far as how to manage that environment. That's a great question, and I'm going to write that down.
Johnny, this is Riggs. So from an SCLI perspective, I don't think that there's really been necessarily any conversation about that. But I was actually just texting Ben, and even though we've got a speaker / facilitator and a chatter, do you see any reason why we can't rotate, say even every 15 minutes or so? I mean, I think that would actually keep it more fresh for our guys, while at the same time kind of making sure that we're building up that bench strength, if you will. So and again, not to be dismissive, but man, I think I'd be bored out of my skull if I was just the chatter guy for every online workshop session.
Well, and if you're talking about switching up the role between the chatter and the facilitator, Riggs, to that specifically, in my mind, we're clarifying the role so you guys know what's expected. How you guys do it, I don't care. Like, if you're on,
Gotcha.
I don't know if you're online and can see, but you're paired with Ben Noor. If you and Ben get on a call and you discuss it and you're like, hey, I got this idea, and he's like, hell yeah, let's do that, then I'm all for it. If somebody's less comfortable with that and would like to stick to a role, I'm totally cool with that too. I want you guys to create that dynamic that works. And I think what you're saying brings up something important too. Maybe it's difficult if the chat board's busy to monitor, but this separation of roles does not mean that the chatter is not supposed to be part of this conversation. 100%, we want the chatter to be part of the conversation as well. I mean, you can see in some of the pairings, and I will tell you, in the pairings, some of this was done purely off when you guys are available. I tried to pair up some of the guys with what I thought would be kind of fun or neat pairings. Some of them, it was just straight up, hey, these two guys are available at this time, and they're, the only two guys that can do it. So some of these were done strictly by that. So, I mean, we've got certain groups that have guys that have been facilitating forever. Not that that's the measure of how great they are, but I mean, we've got everybody on this team's a powerhouse facilitator, but obviously there's some guys that could easily, run the discussion and do it well the whole time. I really encourage you all to find ways to ensure the two of you are working together, that you're both regularly involved. So if it's something like Riggs just said, where you guys switch on and off, whether it's multiple times per call, switch off every other call, however you want to do it, I just want to make sure that both facilitators' voices are heard throughout those calls. So that's a good point. Does that help, Riggs?
Yeah, it does, definitely. Thank you. So, you know, and I think I'm asking the question too, because from a professional perspective, I think I've got probably 8 or 9 webinars a week that I have to participate in, and usually it's for work, you know, I mean, so it's about plastic surgery or an injectable or anatomy. And, you know, I think the more engaging ones are the ones where there's actually 2 speakers and they kind of alternate back and forth. And it's, you know, sitting in the audience, I think it kind of makes things a little fresh and keeps on the tone, or keeps you on your toes. But then I think also if you have one speaker who's just presenting for a nonstop 1 hour, 1.5 hours, kind of by the end of it, it's almost like they ran out of steam. So, you know, we definitely want to make sure that we're bringing the maximum energy and enthusiasm. So that way, you know, the people on the other end of the computer are pretty stoked too. You know, we want them as engaged as possible as well.
Sure. And one of the other things I wanted to mention, and it kind of came out of what you just said, Riggs, is that, you know, keep this in mind. For some of our undergrads, you know, maybe they're off for the summer and they're working or whatever, and they're not doing this. But, you know, some of our guys have just come off being in classes, or they're in online classes now, and they've just been inundated with this online environment, right? So to your point, Riggs, if there's ways that we can do things by having 2 speakers, or making sure you're engaged, which is what we want, or switching it back and forth, or you guys working together to find ways to create that engagement, you know, to pick on Riggs a little bit in a positive way. I think I sat in on one of your sessions, so I could learn a little bit, maybe 2 years ago. And I think right in the middle of one of the sessions, you know, without really changing the tone, you did a quick energizer and got everybody back, you know, because you saw the tempo go down a little bit because it was halfway to 3/4 through. You did a quick little energizer. It took literally like 2 minutes. I wish I could remember what it was. And bam, the guys are right back engaged. Like, some of these guys are going to have virtual fatigue. And that's something that between the 2 facilitators, you know, like right now, I'm reading shit on a PowerPoint. I really don't have a lot of opportunity to see your guys' faces. So, you know, on the screen. So somebody should be watching that, even if you guys determine who's going to switch on and off and do it. And when you find those moments, you know, come up with some ideas to engage them. But maybe having the 2 speakers, make sure they're engaged, will kind of mitigate some of that anyway. So that's a great perspective, especially from you having to do this quite often for work. So love it. Any other questions on the co-facilitation? And again, you know, again, while you're thinking of your question, this is something I really want to focus on for next week. And I know that's just another call, and I hate to have everybody have to get back on another call. So I definitely appreciate your guys' commitment to this. But I think if we're going to do another call leading up to workshop, that's what we should focus on, is the facilitated environment. And we can offline any of the material stuff, you know, or hit up me or Stu or Pete or somebody direct on that. But for now, any other questions on facilitating as a group? Grievances for who I paired you with?
I'm
Like,
good.
DeAndre might have some, but I don't.
Poor Dan.
I'm sure Beck will weigh in.
Trying to hold strong.
All right.
I'm happy with Eric.
Yeah, Johnny, you had already warned me that I drew the short straw, so.
You did. I'm sorry, brother. You got stuck with the Grand Queester. What are the odds?
Sorry about that.
Well, hey, what do you know? All right. First of all, I'm gonna go back, since we're at Q&A. I want to go back so I can open this up and actually see the screen here with you guys who are logged in.
Wait, did we actually finish the topics in under an hour?
Stu, if you would shut your mouth for 1 second, you would hear what I'm about to say. What I'm about to say is I want to mark this damn date because it's 8:48, and there's no way in shit I've ever been through anything with this team in less than an hour and a half, I would say, let alone an hour. So from
Right.
this point on, y'all are in charge because this is Q&A time, and I'm sure some guys might hang around for a glass of bourbon after. But
I'm going to issue binder clips for the tongues. I found it very effective in keeping me quiet the entire call.
well, from here on out, if it goes past time, it's y'all's fault. But you guys know I have all the time in the world for you. So one thing I do want to do at some point is I'd like to hear a few words from our Grand Queester, just kind of, you know, a lot of what has been done, all of what has been done to this point came out of his directive in October to get online learning and more learning resources in our undergrads' hands. And it just so happened that 6 months later, fucking COVID happened. And when Team Croc sat down and said, what the hell are we going to do? And they decided to do it virtual. Between the Grand Queester Commission, which, you know, our worthy Grand Queester, Dan Benoit, myself, I got to say, man, coming into this, we had half the materials written down. It wasn't built out the way that Team Croc and SCLI wanted it, but the content was there. And, you know, the foresight from Brother Temby to know that these were resources the undergrads were going to need really set up Team Queester to be in a position to provide this kind of learning to them. So I'm very, very grateful that happened, Brother Temby, because without your directive and you seeing this need, especially for this position, I really don't know what it would have taken to get all this stuff together. And we're not done. I mean, this is baseline stuff right now. We're going to break this out into smaller modules with more information, right? This is the jumping off point. But Ryan, you got us started, man. This is your baby, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to jump in here and just kind of give your perspective of what's going on with the fraternity, the finances, COVID, and just where you're at as far as what you need us to hear to continue with your mission, man, because it's awesome. So please jump in.
Well, first of all, thanks, brothers, for again having me on a call and actually inviting me to be part of the group this year. I'm excited, and I'm happy to be a I don't know what you call it, a chatter, Dan. So don't worry, you can take the stage as much as you want to. But let's first, for what you said, you gave me far too much credit. If everybody who was on the call last summer remembers that conversation about doing job-specific training for Queesters came up during that call, and we had a wonderful discussion about it. And all I did was what I said I was going to do on that call, is follow through, make sure that SCLI knew how important it was to me that Queesters got real job training, and if it wasn't going to be part of workshop, well, then we needed to make it some part of something so we could get that kind of training to those guys. Then really, Dan and Johnny took off, and Johnny, man, tore ass into it and set the standard, really set the standard, and is head and shoulders above every other division for what real job training looks like. And honestly, it's when he hit Jim Cogdell with the first round, and I mean class number 1 of the training, Jim and I opened it up pretty much at the same time, and were overwhelmed by it. I mean, it was exactly what we were hoping for, and it was perfect. And so COVID happened, which is unfortunate for all of us, but man, oh man, did we look smart. All of us on this call, everybody participated. Boy, do we look smart, because we were way, way, way ahead of where everybody else was going to be. And so I'm just glad we finally got it done, or it's in the process of getting done. I know they're going to make some tweaks to it, but my God, I don't know how many years it's been since we had true job training other than for McGeesters, for our officers, about how to do their role, how to transition their role. So it's pretty exciting. So thanks to you, Johnny and Dan, for sure. The support I get on that committee is fantastic. Yeah, I'm really proud of what you put out. I hope you are. This is great, and the fact that we have a wonderful curriculum for a virtual workshop, which nobody in the world could have ever predicted, is just wonderful. I'll pause if anybody wants to say anything, and then I'll go in. I'll talk for as well. You guys know me. I'll talk for as long as you'll want me to talk, and then I'll shut up when you tell me to shut up. So, but I can talk more about the fraternity and what's going on if you want to hear about that.
We do.
Okay.
I think that'd be great, Ryan, if you would.
So it's been a hell of a biennium. Holy Christ. Steve has a stroke. Tim calls me and says, I can't be acting Grand Consul. I don't have time to do it on my own. I need help. Would you help me? And what do you say? You say yes, right? And so that began what I'll say is an introduction to what it's like to be a pretend Grand Consul. And let me tell you, brothers, holy sweet God, is that job hard. What we ask of that man is almost impossible. We as a fraternity ask him to be perfect. We ask him to respond personally to every single email, every call, every letter, every single thing that anybody ever does. And some people, if they don't get a response, and I mean quickly, they get grumpy, really grumpy. And so that job, we ask him to run all the meetings, approve all the contracts. Sure, church and team do most of the work, but he's got to run it through the executive committee, prepare agendas, handle fundraising with this foundation. I mean, it is, let me tell you, it's an impossible job. Steve got a stroke basically because he was tearing ass into that job, doing it better than about, well, I'm not going to say better, I don't want to insult anybody, but as good as anybody had done it, and very, very well. Flying around every weekend and sometimes 2 cities, and that stress had to be the cause of it. There's no other way around it. So that's how it started, and then COVID sort of creeped up on us all of a sudden, really quietly. But fortunately, and you all know Tim, Tim had done something over his 4 years where he had turned us from a company, in Simacai company, if you will, corporation, that borrowed money every year to cover the lean months where we didn't have a lot of cash coming in. So the summer months, we had a lot of outlay, especially with workshop and other things. He had decided, well, we're not going to do that anymore. And he put away a significant amount of cash in the sort of a rainy day fund. In addition to that, and he did it quite quietly, he also overpaid the endowment that we have to pay for the Life Loyal SIG program, which pays for the magazine and other things. He quietly overpaid that. And I tell you all of this because Tim gets a significant amount of credit. When we started looking at what the financial implications of what we might have because of COVID, we started looking at what our cash resources were. If we were to get no more money in, if the undergraduate chapters hadn't paid in the spring, how long could we operate the fraternity? Where would we get money from? And it turns out we actually have quite a lot of cash, free cash, unreserved cash that has been squandered away. Investments, the investment committee has done a wonderful job with the investments that we had, and they, even though we've got a terrible market right now, they've really done a wonderful job in keeping our cash available to us and keeping our investments high. And so we quickly figured out, and I did a couple of maneuverings to make sure that the cash was available and unprotected from any of the IRS. And then if you remember 2 years ago, we sold Constantine Capital to RMF and to Kai, and that generated $278,000. I mean, sorry, $2,278,000 worth of cash. We had invested that cash, but not in long-term investments or tied up investments. And so we had all that cash sitting around for us that we could use during this time. Now, Fortunately, at the same time where we're figuring all this out, church is busy cutting and slashing costs at headquarters. Cogdal's busy cutting and slashing costs at SCLI. And so we finished this fiscal year with a positive $450,000 to budget. That's significant. We spent positive the budget, so we spent no reserves and stuck that money away. And then we went about building a schedule, a budget for next year that we presented and got approved the executive committee, that has a 20% reduction in revenue. That's our best guess at what we think the effect of COVID is going to be on our chapters, both in runoff, brothers who don't come back, and in overall loss to pledging and recruiting. We ran that number forward. We reduced the amount of money we asked the foundation because if you can't imagine, the foundation has been suffering also from a lack of donations based on COVID, market being terrible, people losing their jobs, and so I'm sorry, that's me making that beepy noise. I don't know how to. So apologies. Everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was just
typically that happens when somebody drops, but I'm looking at the list. I don't think anybody's dropping. It's I don't know what's causing that, to be honest.
That's right. I'll just talk over it. No worries. I just thought if it was me, I'd try to stop. But
I thought it was your stud detector going off.
Can't have one of those in the house because they stick to my ass. So we presented to the foundation about a 30% drop overall in the amount of grants that we were looking for. We kept to that 20% reduction in revenue, and I'm proud to say we have a budget currently that if it keeps to what we believe it will be, we will only spend out of the reserves that we just put aside, the 450,000. We'll only spend less than 200,000 of that reserve that we put in there. And I want you to know we have millions that we could actually dive into to keep the fraternity running if need be. So at the moment, Sumakai is in, and I'm going to knock on wood, outstanding financial shape to weather this pandemic. I don't want anybody to think that we want to run off 20% or more. If it turns out to be 30%, well, then it'll be 30%, and we can still handle that too. So my message to you guys is you don't have to worry about that. If this thing carries on for 2 years, well, we might need to worry about it a little bit. But year 3, we probably be cutting expenses pretty heavily and a couple of other things. But at the moment, we're in wonderful financial shape. Our undergraduates, as you talk to them, please make sure and appreciate them. While we're not at absolute zero for amount of money owed, we are at $55,000 in accounts receivable at the moment from our undergraduate chapters that doesn't directly have a planned payment, and that's at all levels of aging. And so our undergraduates, who we never once asked them to pay their bills, when the whole thing started, the first thing the church and I agreed on right away was absolutely not. We're not going to pressure our chapters to pay their accounts receivable. We're going to offer help and advice. We're going to talk to them like brothers. We're going to help them with their operations. We're going to do everything possible to make them feel, not feel, but be supported, feel loved, and be real brothers. And in return, they, without having to be nudged, asked, begged, borrowed, threatened, paid their bills. Absolutely and completely. And so as you go through your chapters, understand, please thank the creatures for that. That is just tremendous support from undergraduate brothers. Ordinarily, we're nudging them and threatening them, and we haven't done that at all. And our accounts receivable is as good as it's ever been, maybe a little bit higher, but it is fantastic shape for where we usually are going into workshop. And then finally, I'll tell you, Steve healed very well. He's back. Welcome sight for Tim and I, for sure. And we are happy to have dear God, are we happy to have him back. And he's doing great. He's in the middle of a COVID hell right now, so I sent him some N95 masks a while ago, and I know he's wearing them. Try to keep him healthy. We don't want him getting the virus now. Tim's doing well. We're happy to turn the reins back over to Steve. I think what's come out of it is ordinarily there's a weekly meeting every week for an hour or two between the executive director and the grand consul. One of the positives that's come out of this whole thing is that meeting has been expanded to include Tim and I, and so the four of us get on a call every Tuesday, talk about where we're at, what's going on, what needs to change, what needs to happen, what things we need to get in front of the executive committee. And so we've got a more active group than we've ever had, and more inclusive than we've ever had. And then I just feel like we're doing really well as an organization on the fraternity side, really, really well. And SCLI is a big part of that too. I mean, my God, what successes we've had during probably a year that really should have been considered a shit year for everybody. We've just torn the whole place up. So yeah, things are okay. I mean, Sigma Chi is going to is not only going to survive, we're going to thrive through this. Nobody wants to entertain my idea of starting to do mergers and acquisitions with other fraternities yet, but I'll get them going on that in a little while.
So is there one you want to go by, Ryan?
Say that again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you again, Dan.
Is there a fraternity you want to go by?
Oh, there's a couple that I'd like to go by just so we could turn the whole culture around. But
can we buy some and liquidate them entirely?
Yeah, there's a conversation for you right there. I mean, absolutely. But yeah,
they're not worth anything.
Yeah, you can't do an asset sale with a liability. It doesn't work.
The problem, it's a massive problem. I mean, it's more of a tongue-in-cheek joke than anything else. There'll be a few that go extinct. Don't doubt it. And we've already had one very small one out of New York called Church. And be honest with you, brothers, I can't remember which one it was. Who have like 8 chapters in the whole country. Asked if they could be assimilated. And of course, our response is, well, we would have to take it up by a member obligation. Our Sigma Chi's aren't chosen in mass; we're chosen by individuality. And so, as long as you're okay with us picking through your order and making sure that they would make good Sigma Chi's, we'll be happy to figure out a way to make it happen. They do not like that answer, so I don't think that's going to go very far.
Awesome.
What else can I'll as you know, I'll answer any question at all.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ryan, if you could real quick, I'm going to step away for 60 seconds to get rid of the coffee I drank during the call. I figured after all the information you've given, there's probably a couple questions. So if I could turn it over to you for a few minutes to moderate and answer questions, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, happy to. I'll answer any question you have.
All right, go ahead, guys.
Hey, Temby, this is Riggs. My apologies if you already answered this, but what are we going to do for dues if guys end up not going back to school in the fall?
So the attrition we've seen so far is seniors. And if you guys all know, this is the Quisha division. We don't have to worry about seniors. As far as the fraternity dues goes, we're going to cut, I think, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure we're going to cut the leadership fees in half this year, at least the first semester, to the chapters so that they don't have that burden. RMF keeping the insurance level at 197 is a massive gift. Every other fraternity's insurance is going up 30 to 40% this year, even if they had no claims. So as far as costs to undergraduates go, we're doing a wonderful job of trying to keep costs down to them. Now, there is a bizarre thing going around the universities at the moment that we might get hit with in this group. I'm sure they're going to get hit with it in the council division, where because they're not going back to school, some campuses, guys are trying to resign. I think you probably all know this. I'll just refresh everybody's memory. You cannot resign from being a Sigma Chi. There is no possible way to do that. You can be asked to leave. You can have your ass thrown out, you can have the badge ripped off your chest, but you cannot leave. So our guys will have to understand that that's not acceptable for their brothers of the side they're going to leave. What I think we should encourage them to do, and I'm happy to hear opinions on this because I'm not 100% sold on it, but I think we ought to encourage our chapters to give seniors a different kind of rate this year, sort of a special dues for them. Maybe they pay insurance plus the leadership fee, their share of it. They pay a small parlor fee to the house, and then maybe a sort of ad hoc social. If they go to an event, they can pay for it. If they don't go to events, they don't have to pay for it. That way, we get the dues out of them. They don't have to feel like they're going to want to resign. Like if you were an SAE, you can just walk the hell out. We don't have that. So just to try to make things better, my encouragement to our chapters would be that sort of an arrangement, being very creative with them. Did I answer your question, Riggs?
I think specifically I was referring to those guys where their campuses won't be open in the fall. But I think you did answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, they still got to pay insurance. They still have to pay for their membership into Sigma Chi, which, as we all know, is $500. So, and then they're going to have to pay the reduced leadership fee. Other than that, I think the chapters can administer dues as they want to. It's not a good answer for our house corporations. I get it. House corporations are going to have some trouble. We've got money set aside to lend to house corporations through Constantine Capital, and if they don't have enough, then the fraternity doesn't want to get in the business of lending money to our house corporations. It's too close to that Chinese. That's probably a bad thing. That imaginary wall that we have. I don't think you can say Chinese wall anymore. I don't know. Anyway, you know what I mean. So what we would probably do is we would lend money to Constantine Capital, and then have Constantine Capital actually do the lending to the house corporations. But we do have money in reserves to do that if need be. We don't want any house corporation to go belly up during this whole thing. So, and by I say lend, we'll lend it to them. It'll probably be a 100-year payback or something like that. But nonetheless, we've made money available for that. Actually, this year, I'm proud to say we actually got in the business of lending money to chapters. We did it once and then a second time on an exceptional basis, of course, but where a chapter had proof that they had the money coming in, and they had a real need. They had made some mistakes on some invoicing with their food delivery company. This was in the fall, not the spring, and they were really in a bind for money, not owed to us, but actually owed to that food company. And rather than having to go out to the market and lend it to them, we were able to lend it at a great rate. It was wonderful. They paid it back within 90 days, as they promised they would, and it worked out. So we've got a model now for being able to do that too.
But along that line, Ryan, if brothers are not returning, and say it happens to be sophomores or juniors that were just recently initiated, you got the $200 post initiation dues that's due to headquarters. I can see that's the potential that's going to accelerate if the brothers decide not to go back, and the chapter is going to be on the hook for that $200 fee to headquarters.
Yeah, that is a problem. We talked about that already. Maybe tagging that to the individual in the chapter system and making them responsible for it and alleviating it from the chapter. But unfortunately, you can't do that because our governing laws are very clear. We don't collect dues from members. We collect dues from chapters, and so we're not able to be that kind to them. What we're going to have to do is be kind to them in the helping them collect it. Oh, Greek Build. Johnny, did you tell the guys about the Greek Build deal we got and all of that yet, or is that new?
No, I didn't, and I could pull up the email to get more specifics unless you have them. I believe, if I remember right from the email, I think Greek Build just gave us a deal. Didn't we go from 3% down to 1%?
We,
on the transaction.
if you can look for it, I'll do some talking and dancing while
Yeah.
you bring it up. So Dakota Neff, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, he's become quite the little negotiator. And so we went to Greekville, we went to Omega Phi, and we started negotiating with them as to a better deal for our chapters. And we have absolutely the best deal in the fraternity world for Greekville. The amount of money they collect as a percentage is down. The amount of money they get when someone pays by credit card has been reduced. They've also got, we signed this deal for 5 years. The other cool thing is Greekville will, when they sign up for Greekville and they're utilizing it, Greekville will now automatically do their 990 form for them. They'll charge them either $39 or $99 based on their revenue. I think it's 50,000 is the mark from the top of my head, but they'll get that done automatically. So we no longer have to worry about our chapters that are using Greekville filling out and filing the 990, getting behind on it or any of that stuff. So that's going to be done completely for them. And that was really based on feedback from this team and that we negotiated that, and based on feedback from the undergraduates at workshop last year that said basically we don't really want to learn how to do it, just get somebody to do it for us. And so there you go. So we finally have a way. If a chapter signed up for Greekville, those tax forms are going to be done for them automatically. It's not really an option anymore. So the more people we can get signed up to Greekville, the less problem we have with tax forms.
I was able to pull that up, just so you know, Ryan. So and it's on the screen if you guys can see it, but if you can't read it. So what Dakota sent back to us was we've got a rate lock for 5 years at $5.50 per member, plus the ACH fees when they pay their dues. But the ACH fees were reduced to 1% from 3%. And let me see, it says they're working on a joint marketing cascade with Greekville, so that could definitely be helpful. And then he put in the tax filing information, which if I go to the previous email that you sent, Brother Temby, some of these chapters are going to be paying as low as $39 to have their taxes filed for them through Greekville. And it looks like that's chapters under 50K in revenue, $100 about for those that are over that. So that's pretty significant. Awesome. And if you're not, where to go? If you're not used to ACH transactions and what they cost, 1% is pretty ridiculous. 3% is pretty standard. But when you look at the aggregate over time, that ends up turning into being a pretty significant amount. It's almost like we're collecting money for nothing. And, that's not a collection fee now. That's just a transaction fee for letting brothers pay it, over their through Greekville system. But if I could add something to what you said earlier, Brother Temby, about the 55K in accounts receivable to headquarters, for any of you guys that happen to be on the team, for more than 5, 6, 7 years before all this ACH shit came around, we used to have numbers that were north of $200,000 that it was AR to headquarters from our undergraduate chapters. It was really out of control, and very hard for the chapters to collect those monies. And now that services like this allow payments through ACH, debit cards, credit cards, PayPal, whatever it is, that they can get money, it certainly helped out. So the fact that Greekville came to the table with that deal, that is pretty significant.
When is this going out to chapters?
We signed the deal last week, so it's effective right now. They can start signing up and it's ready to go.
But I mean, when has some type of notification gone out to the chapters about this? Or
no, we haven't sent anything out yet. You guys are free to talk about it in your small groups, for sure. Absolutely. And Johnny, if you want to send that contract out to the team, there's nothing private about it. What I would ask, brothers, is just don't share it outside of the Sigma Chi circle. Because Greekville doesn't want the world to know the rates that we got from them. For sure they don't. So just don't share it. But yeah, John, if you want to send it out to everybody so they can read through it themselves, it's a fantastic contract. We've got, and should they screw up or something, or even if they sell their company to somebody else, we have outs. So if it starts to suck, we can get out of the contract. It's not a locked in thing. It was skillfully done by Dakota for sure.
I'll take a look. I don't know if I have the actual contract, but I'm sure Dakota will share it if I have your approval.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I want to tell you about is we had a real problem with revenue from outside sources. So we have the Geico thing. You guys know about that, but pretty much every other company other than T-shirt vendors that we were doing business with went bankrupt. We lost the coffee one; they went bankrupt. The socks company went bankrupt. The ones on the store that we were using all either went bankrupt or decided not to re-up with it. So we were running out of affiliates that were actually giving us some revenue. So I want to, if you haven't seen the one about the wine, let me tell you about the wine. And if you haven't signed up for the wine, because I'm not a real big wine drinker, but my wife is, probably how she stays married to me. The wine deal for us is the way we're going to structure these deals with the foundation going forward. Because the way it used to be is the foundation would take all the money and then we'd have to apply for it in grants. And that's nice, but it doesn't really help us because that money becomes restricted the minute it comes in. This deal, and again, this is between us, okay? So let's try to just be privileged in our information gathering here. But this deal is the fraternity gets 9.5% of the 20% that goes to Sigma Chi. The foundation gets the rest, but right away we get an immediate impact from that deal of 9.5% of every dollar. So almost 10 cents on every dollar goes right to the fraternity, paid immediately upon the monthly true ups. And that wine is pretty damn good. I don't know if you guys know that winery, but it's a Rick's probably knows it, one of those fancy California wineries with the snooty stuff and all of that. So it's quality stuff. He's going to put it in proper Sigma Chi. They're going to market it. They promise they're going to market different releases, different pieces of it are going to have different bottle labels, and he's even going to put out some very high end. Now, some of this might be a little bit of bullshit. So this is the intention, right? I mean, we had a sales thing going on for sure, but some etched bottles, if you will, with really high end wine in them of its high end releases that he's going to make available to the club. If you want to buy into that level of wine, it'd probably be, I don't know how expensive wine gets, but dear God, if they get more than bourbon for it, I don't know why anyone would buy it, but I'm sure it's going to be several $100s per bottle, and we get a piece of every piece of that.
So I don't mean to interject, but I actually, so Brandon, the guy who owns Fairwinds, he posted on Whiskey Cigs right when COVID first hit. And I reached, and he's like, if you buy a case of wine, I'll do a private tasting with my winemaker and me. So I did the same with my pledge class. And we actually did a tasting with Brandon Cheney, the owner of Fairwinds. And this was probably the week before they made the announcement. And he showed us all the bottles. And I'll say three things about it. Number one, he is 1,000% serious. He's all in. He has the means and everything, and I'm very familiar with the Napa area. Johnny knows my wife was really involved in wine sales and stuff, so she has a lot of friends, and we kind of did some digging, and he's the real deal. Number two, the wine is incredible. We were all really impressed. And number three, it's not hundreds of dollars. It's his whole business model is direct to consumer. So that's why he can give you that such a high percentage, is because he's not paying distribution. It actually costs him less to utilize Sigma Chi as a distribution vessel than it would for him to do a distribution. So it's a win-win on both sides. But yeah, the wines are, $30-$40 a bottle. They're very reasonable. I think his most expensive one he has is in the 70s. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's a great deal. He explained it to us kind of early on, and I could not be more happy with that deal, just as a member of Sigma Chi and as a consumer too.
Oh, thanks for that. I'm happy to hear it. You start negotiating, it all seems too good to be true, right? And that makes you worry. So encourage everybody to buy the wine through through, well, not the undergraduates. The last one we won is Sigma Chi wine. I'm in the middle of the tailgate with a guy hosting a bottle up, right? But that's the worry, of course. That was the big discussion of the executive committee. We really want to be associated with wine. But the answer is, I think the answer is yes, we do, because our brothers like it. It's good stuff. And so if you can encourage everybody to buy it, all their wine needs through there, we get a significant part of it, and it'll replace all the other revenue that we've lost from the other affinity contracts.
Good info, guys, and thanks for jumping in on that, McFadden. I know you guys had a great experience with that. I talked to a couple of the wives about it, and they absolutely loved it. So leverage that with your wives and their friend groups. You know, let's not just think about the Sigma Chi angle. It's our sweethearts too that probably enjoy that shit just as much, if not more, than we do.
Yeah, I bought some, but it's for her.
Johnny.
Yeah.
Johnny. I heard today that in the spring, when the campus is closed, our chapter was giving back money from dues as a credit, or giving back spring dues of some sort, prorated maybe. And I was astonished to hear that.
Yes,
Are you saying
some
the
chapters did that.
chapter gave it back, or the fraternity gave it back?
Chapter.
The chapter was giving dues back to members?
Yes.
Well, and, you know, to some of the things that Ryan said in relationship to this and what you're saying, Peck, and, you know, as we go through this online environment, God only knows where these conversations are going to go or where they need to go. But as much as we want to push financial management training, you know, the COVID environment is certainly overtaken a lot of the narrative in the undergrad world. And obviously that translates directly to the Queester and financial responsibilities, which is why, you know, entities like RMF put out statements to clarify their position, because they're already getting inundated with questions of things like, hey, my campus canceled all activities. You know, our guys weren't in any risk of getting hurt, so our insurance went down, right? And it's like, well, no, that's not how we determine our RMF fees, right? It's based on membership, it's based on the chapter's claim history, it's based on multiple factors, which our Module 5 kind of walks through. And there's certainly more information on rmf.com as it relates to insurance. But to your point, Peck, I think one of the things that, and I think that was Peck that asked the question, you know, one thing we want to be very careful of, you know, that's an example in my mind, without knowing more information, of a chapter acting on its own or under the advisement of maybe a housing corps or alumni, who knows. That's not a fraternity-wide thing. Sigma Chi is not encouraging that, because the liability has not gone away. And, you know, as Ryan said, of course the fraternity wants to find ways to help the chapters, and I'm sure they'll exhaust all options to do so. And you even mentioned some of those options, but the financial impact is still going to be felt by the chapters, whether it's RMF or, you know, through headquarters. So we want to be careful with messaging, and, you know, potentially Queesters bringing up scenarios like that. Well, you know, I heard another chapter in our province did it, or you might get that Queester who says, hey, we gave money back and helped out a lot. It's like, well, did it? You know, you still have to pay that bill. So we're going to have to be very sensitive of that situation and let the guys know. It's like, look, we understand this is challenging and difficult. You know, there's chapters that might lose significant portions of their membership coming back because some students have decided not to come back, especially in campuses where they're eliminating classes in person, or they're eliminating campus activities for the fall and spring already. We got to be careful with the messaging and let these guys know. It's like, look, whatever obligations you have on the books, you got on the books, and you're going to have to pay those bills. And, you know, just because chapter size is reduced potentially, or you have a few guys that are saying they're having financial hardships, you know, the chapter is going to have to work through that with the members, very similarly to how the fraternity is going to have to work through it with the chapter, just as RMF is going to have to work through it with the chapters, just as housing corporations are going to have to work through it with the chapters. I mean, Len and I have talked about that a little bit, and some of the challenges housing corps are going to face. So we want to be careful with
that. The second part of that, Johnny, was that the ARs have gone through the roof because a lot of these actives no longer had a job because of COVID. So they got a double whack going on.
Well,
I'm sure
and
that's a common thing.
That's another thing that we're going to have to navigate carefully, Peck. And, you know, one of the things that's going to come up around module 3 is we're going to start talking about cash flow with these guys in these modules, and they're going to see how cash flow works, hopefully, if I explained it all right. And that's where some of their questions and problems might start popping up. They're going, well, shit, man, here's the deal. I'm already hearing that 10% of our membership isn't coming back. And by the way, that's a significant portion of our cash flow. And I got bills that are tied to that stuff. You know, one of the things that's going to suck, and I get it, to somebody's point earlier about brothers that might skip out, when I think it was Dan Benoit mentioned about brothers that might skip out while they still have obligations to headquarters. If headquarters can't go after the members, which they really can't, you know, we're the ones that are supposed to be stressing to the queesters. It's like, look, it sucks. But here's the deal. And hopefully you guys, if you've gone through the collections portion, I think I said it 3 fucking times. I hate it, but we're holding our brothers accountable to the financial obligation they took upon themselves. That's all we're doing.
Voluntarily.
And we're going to have to hold them accountable to that, even if that means turning them over. You know, services like Greek Bill and, dare I say, LegFi, you can turn a brother over to collections through their system. And yeah, we're going to have to talk to them about taking a hit on the collection fee. I don't know what Greek Bill is. I would assume it's probably in the 25% range because that's standard. But if that's what they got to do to generate revenue to pay bills, that's something they're going to have to look at. And, you know, given money back on dues, I don't see how that's going to help any chapter, unless they got a plethora of cash laying around, and I can't imagine any chapters in that boat right now. But
I think it's going to be a real life CFO corporate opportunity for a lot of queesters to learn how real life goes on, because every one of us on here, I mean, you think about it. I mean, if your people just walked off and they owed you money, then, you know, can it happen? Yes, it can, you know, and what do you do then? So I think it's going to be a real life learning opportunity for us to share with the queesters.
Well, and
potentially work out bankruptcy situation. I mean, it could cause closures.
Yeah, that's it.
At some point, guys, I don't know exactly when this started to happen, but I want to say that as long as I've been on this team, you know, probably around the time that Greenberg was Grand Queester and, you know, Gettings was Grand Queester, certainly with Tim Sanderson, now Brother Temby, while we're empathetic for our brothers as undergraduates and young men, this fraternity has really turned around from when I started and those big ARs happened to push accountability. And it's like, you have a financial obligation, you got to meet it. The first time that we ever went to workshop with a zero balance from the undergrads to headquarters, I was fucking floored. It's like we were talking about how Sigma Chi couldn't pay their damn bills because of what undergrads owed. And then we had what, probably a 4-year run where every year there was zero balance owed to headquarters. And that was because of accountability, not that we were nasty. They said, look, we got to get it done. And the undergrads were held accountable. They got it done. And I mean, to your point earlier, Brother Temby, about, I mean, the undergrads are paying their bills, even though they're having the hardship. And, you know, let's not make the mistake of thinking that's just going to continue at the rate it is, or the 55 is going to go away because everybody's going to pay their bills. But as hard as it is, we're going to have to help our undergraduate queesters understand what accountability looks like at a time like this. Maybe we need to renegotiate that member contract. Maybe the chapter has the ability to extend it out beyond the 90 days, but let's get it written down. Let's make sure it's legit. And then let's try and hold our brothers accountable to whatever those new terms are. And let's find a way to help them understand how to be flexible. You know, it's not a, hey, we signed this back in January. I know some shit happened. Sorry, bro, fuck you, pay me. Well, look, man, if the guy's always paid his bills, why don't you renegotiate with him, just like Sigma Chi is willing to do with you? You know, and if we push that narrative, I think we'll be a lot better off than, you know, certainly encouraging chapters to get money back. If I hear anybody like that, I think I have an obligation to fire them from TeamQC.
I do want to touch on that conversation just a second, if we could. I had a couple of very crafty undergraduates call me from different chapters. They sort of got together and did an analysis of the chapters on their campuses and how much they were paying for insurance versus how much RMF was charging them. And they came up with a couple of ranges. And they wanted to know why we were $20 more a person than, and I think they had used Fidel. And so, brothers, I just want to share with you the reality of why we do pay more than some fraternities. There's no question about it. And I said my answer to them is as true today as it is tomorrow, and it's for as long as we are Sigma Chi's. The reason we pay more is because we have chosen a culture of risk that is higher than other fraternities have chosen. We have chosen to not declare our chapter houses alcohol free and basically lie to the world, which then puts our undergraduate brothers at risk because they have no insurance whatsoever once an insurance company finds any alcohol in the house whatsoever. We aren't interested in that. We are interested in having a pledge program, and all of those things add risk to an insurer, and all of those things add money to what we pay for those insurance. And so when I told them I could reduce their insurance bill by 50% tomorrow if they wanted to have dry chapter houses and no rush. And of course, they did not want that. So the conversation comes up, just know our insurance absolutely light years above everybody else, but it's higher because we have risk threshold like to run our fraternity the way we want to run it, and it will continue to be that way for as long as we run our fraternity with a culture which is integrity and having a pledge program that we believe in. Just I'll stop there because I'm preaching, but just know that's the answer. So.
Hey guys, remember 50 minutes ago when we were celebrating being done with this call early?
Just
lesson, right?
Just remember, I stated back then, 45 minutes ago, whatever happens next is on you guys.
When's the next call, Johnny?
I'll get some information out, Peck. Certainly we can hang here for a few, for some more questions and, well, bourbon and whatever. But if you got to go, you can go. I will get some information out. It seems like, we had pretty good attendance here tonight, so maybe Thursday's a good night. I'll probably shoot for next Thursday, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. That gives us a little time because usually we started at 9 and we get a little too late for most. So I'll get some information out on that, Beck. If you got a roll, no worries.
Good. And Eric and I are going to start rehearsing now.
There you go. So yeah, guys, if you got to bounce, go ahead. I'll get that information out to you here in the next couple of days for our next call. But I do want to kind of jump in on the insurance conversation here because, of course, we've had Steve Davidson come talk to our sections and laid out everything that Brother Temby just said. But he's also told him, it's like, look, just because Sigma Chi has determined they want to, not sweep that alcohol issue under the rug and allow it, that doesn't mean a chapter has to allow it. So when these guys started asking Steve Davidson, well, how the hell can we save money? It's too much for us. Well, they can declare their chapter alcohol free, but they also have to assume the risk when they do so. So it's like, hey, you want to reduce your fees? You can declare to RMF you're alcohol free, but if you don't follow that rule, RMF is not going to be there for you anymore. It's a massive risk. And if you remember when that was presented to our queesters, most of them shook their head no, like, nope, we're not even going to tell brothers we could reduce insurance because there's no way in hell they're going to follow that rule, right? But this is information that's on RMF's website. If they want to see how to reduce their costs, stuff like that is right on the website. It flat out tells them you can reduce your cost if you do X, Y, and Z, and that's one of the items. So, I tried to touch on some of that in that module 5 so the guys know where it's at. Actually, I take that back. It's in the module 4, I think, on insurance. But, I think that in light of what I just said, though, and for those that remember that conversation, Team Queester needs to be careful with that because, as a facilitator, you're impressionable on an undergrad. Let's be careful with that conversation because I'm not sure that's a stopgap measure to lower costs for a year or two, right? Like that's a chapter decision that's enormous. Like they're changing the culture of their chapter, and when people are having a hard time paying bills, they'll do pretty extravagant things to make it happen. So, you know, this information's out there. I know some of you guys know it. I just think it's important to clarify that my line of thinking falls under everything that Brother Temby just said about the risks Mackay's willing to take to provide our membership with, you know, flexibility and accountability at the same time. Let's be careful with our conversations with our undergrads and what options we put in front of them.
I think as a housing core individual, you know, yes, I'd love to have our fees come down on the housing core side, but I'm not willing to make the risk because that one alcohol drink shuts down the whole house. Now on the liability side for the brothers, it's going to get them too, but that whole house will be shut down. I mean, so I think there's one overriding vote in any discussion chapter we'll have, and that's tell them get in touch with the housing core.
Well, to that point, Len, those decisions are in a way above the chapter. Like, no, the chapter could make that decision, and I'm not sure the housing core could really say a whole lot about that because they have their own insurance concerns, I'm sure. But you know, that's what I'm saying is while we're dealing with the financial effects of everything that's going on, we need to take a lot of care with the messaging we put out to the undergrads, you know, when we're having conversations about cost savings and whatnot, because some of them are probably just not good options for them. But, you know, to your point, Len, there's another consideration there, say with the housing corporation, it's their liability too, and we have to stay protected. I think you're on mute, Dan.
Yes. And I think, you know, those are good points because the other thing they need to understand is all they need, maybe they're doing remote classrooms. All they need to do is get together, you know, once in the semester for some sort of activity, and they decide they're going to go have, you know, bring beer or something. It's, you know, it's outside, it's someone's home, but they have the whole EC there, they have the whole chapter there, and something happens, and they've declared themselves to be alcohol free. They're not going to be covered. I mean, they need, you know, they need to understand that, you know, they've got to look at the totality of the picture, and not just, oh, well, we're not together, you know, in the house, so yeah, of course we're going to be alcohol free. They're going to, if they think they're going to have any type of event where they're getting brothers together and there's the opportunity for alcohol to be there, yeah, I would not recommend that they sign the alcohol free waiver.
Well, we can also almost guarantee that Brother Queester's getting named in whatever lawsuit happens on some level. So yeah, let's just be careful with those.
Yeah, that's a really good point by Dan, because, you know, even if they shut down the chapter house, let's say they mothball it because, you know, no one's on campus or whatever, you know, that RMF applies to them outside the chapter house. It's not like an insurance policy that applies to the chapter house. It's an insurance policy that applies to the members. So I think that's a really that and what Len said is, you know, hey, talk to your housing core about it. This isn't a decision that you can make alone, you know, because RMF is typically governed and administered by a lot of housing cores. They at least they'll have a lot of say in it. You know, I think between those two, that's a good way. It's a good explanation on how to kind of deflect that conversation.
Well, at this point, guys, I think I would ask if anybody had any final questions for Brother Temby and all that he presented to us tonight. I think that's relevant. And then if there's any other questions on, you know, the total conversation we've had tonight, we can certainly have those now.
I do have a question for Ryan. I want to know if he's gotten any new underwear ads on Facebook.
I get them all the time, man. It's the craziest thing. I don't know if anybody's on my Facebook, but I get these underwear ads where there's like a separate spot for my member and the boys. And then I get, now I'm getting the Depends underwear ads because I guess I hit 50, over 50. And then I got this unbelievable one. It was a towel that dries off your boobs. So now they've decided that I not only have a member that's long enough to have its own compartment, that I can't control myself and due to my old age and overweightness, I now have to have a towel just for my man boobs. Facebook hates me.
Do you have the link for that towel? Just asking for a friend.
Hey, real quick, Ryan, don't they mine search history to find that stuff?
I suppose so, but I can promise you, I did not look up towel to dry my boobs.
Stuart, he said towel, not washcloth.
Oh boy.
Oh dear, it's a funny thing.
Well, any others, guys?
I just say one more thing, guys. I appreciate Johnny. The work he did on the training for our Queesters is absolutely phenomenal.
I'd like to interject and echo that sentiment and say the same, that Johnny's done a phenomenal job on the content and material. And I want to also add that I really like your hat, Brother Timby.
So I wear this hat proudly. I attended a lot of games in Houston over the past few years, and actually, the good friend of mine who had the season tickets, Jim is his name. We would go whenever I was in town, and I was in town a lot. And I heard one day, I heard them banging that garbage can. I said to Jim, what the hell is that noise? It sounds like somebody's banging a garbage can. Every time this guy goes, just before he throws a pitch, it's like they're trying to distract the pitcher. And sure enough, it was the garbage can where they were. So I proudly wear this hat in knowing that all ball teams probably do it. They just haven't get caught.
It's a great hat.
And McFadden, I'm happy to hear about the wine. I really am. I'm so excited about that. On our first day, the first weekend, enough people signed up that we should already expect almost $10,000 in revenue coming into the fraternity for the wine once he builds it and starts shipping it out. So they're really excited about it, and I'm so happy to know that it's good quality wine.
I mean, it really is. And that was, I'm not going to say we had lower expectations, but it's one of those things where you're just kind of like, well, he's a Sigma Chi, he bought a winery and stuff. And I remember my wife tasted it and she was like, wow, shit's really, really good. And, she's like the go-to wine person all the time. So it's, we were pretty excited for it.
I'm over, I mean, you never know, right? And so it's nice to know that's high quality, because I think what we've seen overall with all the products is the Sigma guys are happy to pay for anything, even overpriced stuff, but they demand high quality stuff. Period. That's all there is to it.
Hey guys, I'll say real quick, I kind of lost track of the chat, which is part of the reason we're having co-facilitation this year. Is there anything that I missed that anybody put in the chat that I haven't answered or done? I apologize that I missed all that.
No, it hasn't been that. Rod had posted some comments about a parent asking for a refund.
Okay.
For the spring semester. So that was the only thing that came up.
I think Rod's already gone.
And to answer that question, by the way, that's the chains on the badge, brothers. Those are chapter specific issues, not headquarters specific issues.
Well, I think it also gives a chance to get people to start thinking of, especially in terms of cash flow, about understanding fixed expenses versus variable expenses. I mean, if you're getting rid of all of your parties, then you might, have some reductions in your expenses, but you're probably going to have some increases in them next year. So
that's basically the refunds that I heard of came back. They gave refunds based on prepayments of formals, prepayments of other major social events. That's the refunds that they gave back to the guys.
Yeah. Well, that's a good clarification. And I would also say too, in relation to the parent conversation, and I'll offline that with Rod later. That's kind of new world shit from where I was at when I was an undergrad. I mean, we didn't even know who people's parents were, let alone have them involved in any of the decision making for what we considered grown ass men. I would say this. I mean, even in our own Sigma Chi contracts, the samples that we're using for Queester training, there is a spot to tie the parents to the contract, and so be it if that's what needs to happen. Some of these financial softwares also allow parents to sign in to see member accounts and make payments on their behalf. So, you know, it's kind of a brave new world, I guess, where grown men bring their parents into their contracts, and so be it. But I think that the point is that, hey, if a parent's contacting the Queester to find out about this refund, the first damn thing the Queester needs to do is make sure that parent has the right to even make the phone call. And if that parent's not tied to the financial contract, that Queester has no obligation, nor should be sharing any information with a contract their legal age son has entered into with another organization, and share that. And there's a polite way to do that, for sure. I don't know how often that kind of a thing is going to come up, but not only are we trying to educate our undergraduate Queesters on what it means to be a financial manager, you know, there's a business component, you know, not just financial, that goes along with this. Is, you know, you're administering contracts that have specific verbiage to it. That, you know, there's one example. If someone who was of legal age enters into a contract for a car loan or, you know, personal insurance or whatever, mommy and daddy can't call on that. And that insurance company is probably not going to enter into a conversation with them about the specifics of the contract that's been entered into with another legal adult that the parent's not signed to. And again, I think this is going to be a limited kind of thing that won't happen very often, if at all. But we need to help our guys understand. It's like, well, whether you're 20, 21, or whatever age you are, you're part of that administering of the contract with those members. You got to be careful what information you share. And maybe we need to revisit that when we break this out and get a little bit more specific. You know, I kind of touched on who's allowed to, you know, who's allowed to be part of the contract talks, but that's a good point as far as maybe that's something we need to elaborate on and help our guys understand, not just with the parent situation, but in all situations, those contracts are between the people that are written into it.
Yeah, and for the sake of the conversation, I'd recommend you just point the Queester back to the chapter advisor and let or grand praetor, let them get involved with parent conversations. It's too hard. There's a reason why that brother is pushing their mom onto them versus dealing with their mom themselves, and that relationship could be outrageously tricky. So strong recommendation to get an adult involved to help them with the parent conversations.
Well, you know, one thing I'll say, man, you know, as the accolades were going around, and, you know, certainly appreciated, but, you know, one of the things that I've tried to push in the content is working with the financial committee, and Dan Benoit spent a significant amount of time outlining the responsibilities of that financial committee. We as Team Queester have not really pushed that narrative overly hard in the past. And I think it's one of the more important narratives that exists within this position is you're not alone. You shouldn't be alone. And if you don't have an advisory committee to go to, you got to read this content, man, because it's good stuff, right? And right involved in that, because it ties into this, is the financial committee is supposed to be reviewing member contracts. So the financial committee that's going to include an alumni advisor, you know, right there is our connection to, hey, brother, parents are calling, need you to get involved in this. And if we need to your point, Ryan, you know, sometimes you got to go to that advisor or that praetor because they have an official capacity. But hopefully if the Queesters are understanding why the financial committee exists, that it's there to help review those contracts and administer collections, that it's like, hey, man, you know, be careful engaging in that phone call, you know, per your comments, Ryan. We don't know the dynamic of that relationship. Let's not get involved in that. Let's push that up the ladder a little bit and let people that are used to dealing with that kind of shit deal with it.
Yeah.
So, man, Team Queester's come a long way since the shit we used to get to talk about. If we just got through talking how to build a budget, we felt pretty good about it 15 years ago. Now we're talking about how to talk to parents alongside the brothers.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to get better at it, because as our brotherhood diversifies and we get more Latinos into our organization, they bring their parents as a culture to events. It's not uncommon to have them show up at the tailgate, show up at this stuff, bring bring food and participate with their sons as members of the fraternity, and so we're gonna have to get, yeah, it's a family event, and so we're gonna have to get better at talking to parents and get more used to it for sure.
I had a conversation with a financial advisor of the sorority tonight, and a large sorority. And she said her budget for recruitment this year is zero because they're all going to be virtual. So that's a good cost savings.
Ay, what a shame. I
That's
hope
the way
that,
it's going.
I hope that's not the advice that our guys are getting.
And they have initiated people virtually.
Yeah. So we have a committee going, by the way, in case you get that question. There is a committee right now being worked. Eric Hansen's heading it up to figure out what stuff we can do virtually that is ritualistic, what the rules are for that, all of that stuff. They're going to come out and put out what their recommendations are. I don't know. They typically don't move very quickly, but they're going to submit those hopefully before the semester starts, so we can get them out to the undergraduates, and we'll probably task poor Cogdell with and his team with building a how-to list so that it comes out consistent format. So that's being looked at. I don't know how in the world we would ever initially virtually. And I know the schools that insisted that we did, we basically gave them the middle finger this year and said, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. We'll do what we want to do. Because it's not possible for us to do that. Not that I can imagine. I mean, there's just too much to it that is involved that just simply couldn't be done virtually. But you never know. I could be wrong. So I can say, as of now, there has never been a virtual initiation of Sigma Chi. And then as far as if you're giving advice to our questers about recruitment dollars, recruitment money should actually be spent a little bit more this year than in previous years, because if you imagine, they're going to be forced to do virtual recruitment, which means they're not going to buy thousands of wings that they're going to hand out on sort of tour of the house night. But instead, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have events where they do virtual stuff, and then they're going to meet these guys one-on-one on campus. And those are going to be lunches and coffees and dinners and stuff like that are going to have to be reimbursed in smaller group settings. So you're going to have more members of the chapter involved more times to spend money to go do the sort of one-on-one personal recruitment that we're going to have to do, or two-on-one, et cetera, et cetera. And then the large dinners, the invite dinners, are going to be broken into smaller groups. And so you're going to have, you're going to spend more on recruitment. Let's just face it, to be able to do it, even if it is quote unquote virtualized, the virtual part's going to be the pare down part. The Mission 365 individual recruitments, and we're all going to be done, in small groups, still building those relationships and still doing it. So I know the sororities have decided they're not allowed to do that, and that's why she was saying they've got zero. I get it, but thank God I didn't join a sorority, by the way. I mean, just dear Lord. You just imagine.
I tried to join a sorority, they wouldn't let me in.
Yeah, well, I would have there anyway. I hope we never get to the point where we think we can substitute a real brotherhood for and real recruitment. I mean, our guys are absolutely going to embrace the Mission 365 that's coming out, that's virtual, which is going to be components of virtual and then components of getting together individually. I mean, it's just the way it's going to work, and sure, they can save some money by going to dining halls and things of that nature, but universities can say it has to be virtualized. But if the dining hall is still open, that means I can go take somebody over to the dining hall and talk to them the same as I would talk to anybody else in the dining hall. And I don't want to hear it if they get in trouble for it. And I can tell you, I have no patience for that bullshit from universities telling us we can't get together and talk as students when other students are getting together to talk to students. And I just had a conversation. I took a job. I retired from my IT job. I took a job with the NIC, and I just had this conversation with one of my campuses where I basically said, in no uncertain terms.